To start off this section, I want to give you two general principles of civilization. You might want to jot these down, so in case you ever start a civilization, you'll know how to do it. Two general principles of civilization. You remember, of course, that civilization refers to societies where people live in cities, or at least where the city is important to them. They may live on a farm out in the countryside, but the food they grow they sell in the city, so the city is important to them as an economic center. When they have legal disputes, they go to the court in the city. They go to the court to the city to go to a temple to worship, perhaps. Where the city is a military center for defense, educational center, perhaps, and where at least people have access to a written language. That doesn't mean that everybody in the city knows how to read and write, but somebody does. And so if you need to have someone read something to you, you can go and find someone who knows how to read and write who can read what you need read to you. The first general principle of civilization is that in the ancient world, civilizations tended to develop alongside major rivers. Now I can put that principle to you even more strongly, and that is that in the ancient world, with only one exception, or clear exception that I know of, every civilization in the ancient world developed alongside a major river. There's only one clear exception to that general principle. There's a situation where it's unclear exception, and that would be in Mesoamerica, where the pattern for developing civilizations would develop alongside smaller rivers that all flowed into a major lake. But that seems to me to be just a variation on this first general principle. As far as I can tell, in the ancient world, there's only one exception. We'll get to the exception when we get to it. But as far as I can tell, there's only one exception to this general principle. We've got a name for civilizations that develop alongside major rivers. We call them riverine civilizations. And of course, you see the word river in riverine. The center of life in riverine civilizations was an irrigation system. You build your city next to a major river. Now, why would you want to build your city next to a major river? Well, there are several reasons, but the most obvious is the most important, and that is to get access to fresh water. Fresh water first to drink, and then to water your crops and animals with. But not everybody can live next to the river, okay? There are other reasons to build next to a river. If you build your city next to a river, you can't be attacked by land on at least one side of your city. So it serves a defensive purpose. There are several other purposes as well, or reasons as well. But not everybody can live next to the river. And so you have to build a series of irrigation ditches and canals to carry water out from the river, out to where people actually live, so they can first drink the water and then use the water to water their crops and animals. And the center of life in a riverine civilization is the irrigation system. Once you've built that irrigation system, you've also built all the roads for the city, or at least most of the roads for the city. As it turns out, it's easier to float heavy things around than it is to carry them in a wagon. All you got to do is lift up the heavy thing, put it on a raft, and then you float it to wherever you want it to go. That's a lot easier than loading it up on a wagon and then pushing the wagon through over land to get to where you need to go. So once you've built the irrigation system, you have the roads already built for the city. Then the fish that live in the irrigation system provide another source of food for the people in the city. So the whole riverine society revolves around the irrigation system. So that's the first general principle of civilization, that in the ancient world, civilizations tended to develop alongside major rivers. The second general principle is that, as far as I know, with no exception, every riverine civilization developed into what you and I would call a dictatorship. Now, we might call the dictator different things in different places. We might talk about the king in Mesopotamia, or the emperor in China, or the pharaoh in Egypt. But if you or I visited a riverine civilization, we would come to realize pretty quickly that we were living in a place where at least one person, or at best perhaps a few people, ran everything. And that's an interesting principle. And here's why. In every riverine civilization, there's an irrigation system. Everybody depends on the irrigation system for their water. Water first to drink and then to water their crops and animals with. And in every riverine civilization, somebody figured out, if I get control of the water supply, everybody's going to do what I tell them to do. And in every riverine civilization, somebody got control of the irrigation system, and everybody did what they told them to do. A corollary, I guess, to that second general principle. The key to being a successful dictator, a really successful dictator, is to get control of something everyone needs to have to survive. If you want to be a really good dictator, you got to get control of something that everybody needs to have to survive. And when you think about it, there's not very much on that list. Now, there's a lot of nice things to have, okay, but not an awful lot that everyone needs to have to survive. And individual people may need something to survive. If you are going to jump out of an airplane, you're going to need a parachute to survive. Almost likely you're going to need a parachute to survive. But most of us are going to make it through life just fine, never having strapped on a parachute, okay? Something everyone needs to have to survive. Well, there's not much on the list. But water's on the list. Water's on the list. There's a 3-day envelope for water. If you run out of water, you've got about 3 days before you die. Air is on that list, I guess. Everyone has to have air to survive. If you don't have air for a few minutes, then you die. Food, I guess. Depends on how your body is built, but you can go several days, certainly, well, you can go several weeks without eating. But eventually, you're going to die. And I guess healthcare, because at some point you'll be laying on the floor, and if somebody doesn't give you CPR, then you're not going to survive. I mean, everybody's going to end up in that place, or someplace very similar, at some point in their lives. Well, at some point in their lives, probably at the end of the life, okay. But, there's not all that much you need to have, that everyone needs to have to survive. But the key to being a successful dictator is to get control of something everyone needs to have to survive, and water's on that list. And in every riverine civilization, somebody figured out how to get control of the water supply.